Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome to yet another episode and installment in my What the Hell series. Once again guys, big thank you to all of you on supporting all of my content recently. I've really been appreciating it, and I hope you're enjoying this new little series on the side, where I get to talk about lesser known characters. Now, with that said, God, I can't believe I'm talking about this. Today, we're going to be talking about a cursed boss of the MK franchise, a fusion of the new god leader of Apokolips and Outworld's emperor, Dark Kahn. Ooh, I never thought the day would come where I'm actually talking about this travesty of a game. But before we jump into this burning, smoldering volcano, we do actually have a sponsor for today's video. Raid Shadow Legends has taken over, and gaming will never quite be the same ever again. Raid is the first game to bring a true console-level experience to your phone, setting a new bar for mobile games to catch up on. There's simply no going back now. Explore millions of champions, combinations, and master countless tactics as you take on raid bosses, dungeon runs, campaign battles, and PvP arena matches. I'll have my links down below so you can download and play Raid yourself, as it's available on your mobile devices and PC. I've been playing Raid for a while now, and I gotta say, some of these champions they got in game are just absolutely badass. One of my personal favorites is the legendary Astrolon. By himself, he hits like an absolute truck, but when paired with a character like Countess Lix, it's pretty much over before it's even begun. His ability to constantly debuff his enemies complements his already overpowering moveset, as he's simply a character that can cleave his enemies in the blink of an eye. My next personal favorite is Cecia. If your team lacks burn damage, then look no further, as she can hit the whole enemy team with a HP burn debuff, and even herself. I know, that may sound bad, but you couldn't be more wrong. You see, Cecia has a passive that kicks in the second anyone is on fire, so if you pair her up with Cardia, that friendly health burn debuff heals instead of damages. So by stacking your team the right way, she's perfect for almost every scenario. Now, one of my personal favorite things about Raid is the ability to play on the go. As someone who travels a lot for commentary, it's great being able to pick something up and play it anytime, anywhere. It in turn allows a lot of long flights to be that much more bearable. So, with that said, what's coming to Raid? Well, this month, Raid is jam-packed with events to kick off the summer, including more new content. There's a plethora of brand new champions coming out, and there also is a new rotation on the Doom Tower. So you most certainly want to get those champions as soon as possible, so you can rise to the challenge and eventually reach the top. Raid has a lot going on right now, and it only grows with each passing month, so you definitely don't want to sit out and miss out on these amazing events coming your way. And if you want a head start, all you have to do is hit the link in the description below or scan my QR code. Once you do that, you get an epic champion known as Chonoro, who is fantastic for dealing with the Doom Tower, 200k silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and finally 1 ancient shard, so you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in game. All of these treasures will be waiting for you here. So what are you waiting for? It's just that easy. Click the link in the description below and I will catch you all over there. Now, chances are, especially if you're someone new to the series, you've probably never heard of Dark Kahn. In fact, at most, you've probably only ever seen glimpses of him here and there. But why is that so the case? Well, it's largely due to the fact that Dark Kahn was featured in the weakest Mortal Kombat game in recent memory, Mortal Kombat vs. DC. Now, why was that the case? Well, let's talk about it in greater detail. Mortal Kombat vs. DC would be the first and only crossover game in Mortal Kombat's history, and you think that on the surface, this crossover would actually work, but it really didn't. You see, a lot of liberties were taken when it came to making this game. Mortal Kombat during the early 2000s had kind of fallen from grace and fizzled out as a franchise. While still iconic in its own right as a title, the 3D era of games ushered in a new era of characters in the hopes of appealing to a new generation of fans. somewhat looking to recapture that lightning in a bottle. And whilst this new era did somewhat work, this trilogy of games didn't have a true face or perspective on what was really going on. The 3D era of games suffered from an identity crisis, as it just sprinkled in new character after new character after new character. And whilst the ideas and concepts were very interesting and cool, they were never truly flourished or explored. And because of this, many were left on the cutting room floor or simply fell to the side. This is a curse that would plague the Mortal Kombat series till this very day, as many characters from that era of games simply would not return. Now, with the main cast and line of characters gone, many old school fans of the franchise had turned away from the series, feeling like their generation's stories were now done and it was time to move on. So, with the MK side of things now covered, let's talk about DC. Now, at the time of MKvDC's creation, which is roughly around 2006 and 2007, comic book movies hadn't quite entered the mainstream eyes they are now. Comics were a very niche part of pop culture, and whilst yes, there were films like Raimi's Spider-Man and Nolan's Batman, the comic book movie renaissance hadn't quite begun. If anything, those films were the somewhat grandparents of this current era. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because DC was kind of in an identity crisis. It hadn't quite found a way to define itself from its competition. Like these days, their films definitely do try to appeal to the older market with a mature rating. So the DC brand now were willing to take chances. At the time back then, they wanted to appeal to a larger demographic, aka kids. So because of this, upon the game's creation, it was not given the usual M rating, but instead a teen rating, which understandably was very disappointing, as the developers of the game were the ones from Midway who had created the previous Mortal Kombat installments. So with this now done, how exactly did it affect the game? Well, for something created by MK devs, fairly disappointing. You see, clearly the team had to take a step back from how they would usually approach their games. Appealing to a younger demographic meant that they had to draw a line with certain ideas and concepts when it came to gameplay. One of its biggest hindrances due to its rating was of course the fatalities, an iconic piece of Mortal Kombat history that helped cement its creation, legacy, and rise to infamy. Here they had been watered down, neutered, and were shunned by the very game they were in, as the camera would pan away during a fatality sequence, simply implying what had happened. Whilst the gameplay wasn't dreadful, and the heroic brutalities were a nice addition for the DC characters, the game was simply not made to accommodate longtime MK fans, and thus because of this, it would be shunned by its fanbase and community, hence why you never really hear about Mortal Kombat vs DC. Along with this, it's not exactly canon with the main lineup of games, and it is why most fans will go, "Ew, stop talking about that shit game." So with that said, let's actually talk about Dark Kahn properly, as he's very integral to this game's story and how it all kind of unfolds. Now, Dark Kahn is a very interesting being, one that came into existence by unconventional means. What I mean by this is that on two different planes of existence, in this case and scenario Earthrealm, and the other Earth being that of the DC universe, would be attacked by their enemies who attempted to invade and conquer their home. For MK, this would be Shao Kahn and his Outworld horde, and for DC, it would be Darkseid and his Parademon army. Now, on both sides, the bad guys are defeated, with the Emperor and New God being forced into a portal to return back to their respective homes defeated. All seemed well and simple, but the heroes couldn't be more wrong. You see, on two separate Earths, a portal and Boom 2 were opened in the same exact spots at the same exact time. This open rift and tear between two separate worlds would basically tear a hole between both worlds, like a bullet through a windshield. So when Darkseid and Shao were forced through the same portal, they were more or less forcibly merged into one entity. It blended their minds and bodies into one being. Now, What's quite interesting here is that the merging of the two beings is completely missed out on in-game. We don't really see Dark Kahn's birth per se, but with that said, there is in fact a tie-in comic called Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe Beginnings. This tie-in kicks off right after the two are merged and shows how the two destroyers came to be. This combobulated upon his creation. Dark Kahn had to collect his thoughts as he was handling the two different minds of the powerful conquerors. When his mind settled, his gaze fell upon the two worlds, the ones he had attempted to conquer. Now, as he watched from his torn rift realm, in a fit of rage and frustration, he would strike the ground, sending shockwaves through his fists. And it's here where Dark Kahn realized he had developed a new form of power at his fingertips. You see, the Grand Deity had a form of power that was unheard of in both universes, and that was the power to merge realities and realms of his own volition. Not bound by the laws of the new gods or elder gods, Dark Kahn would begin to merge the realms together. To practice this, he would merge the barren wastelands of Outworld with the barbaric hell of Apokolips, and this would quickly become his new home. Realizing what he could now do, his quest was to capture both Earths, but he would play this smart. You see, as he explored his powers, he started to learn where it came from. Rage. It was a form of power that not only allowed him to bend reality, but also poison the fighters of each world. No matter how strong-willed they were, Dark Kahn could taint their morals and have them suffer from an unquenchable thirst for blood that would drive them to attack their friends and foes alike. No one was safe, so this more or less is the origin of where rage comes from. Also, fun fact here about this tie-in issue, a lot of the artwork here was in fact done by John Tobias. Now, following these events, Dark Kahn remains absent for most of the game's story, as the heroes and villains are all fighting it out amongst themselves. Eventually, they're able to overcome their bloodlust and challenge Dark Kahn on his home turf. But once again, they fall for the Grand Deity's madness. This warps and contorts their mind as they all begin to fight each other. It's only Raiden and Superman who are able to break his grip, which allows them to team up together and attack and defeat Dark Kahn. With this done, Dark Kahn would be separated back into Darkseid and Shao Kahn, with each world taking back the other. So, Darkseid would be cast and imprisoned for the Netherrealm, and Shao would be cast into the depths of the Phantom Zone. Now, historically, this has been the one and only time Dark Kahn has ever appeared in either series. This character doesn't really come into existence by normal means. It's not like the two can go fusion ha, and it all works like that. We also got to take into mind both of these characters and their personalities and what they strive for. I really do not see Darkseid or Shao Kahn ever really cooperatively working together as separate entities, with Shao's desire for endless conquests and Darkseid's pursuit for the anti-life equation. I could actually see the two coming to blows. Now that's something I'd really like to watch. But back on the topic of Dark Kahn, he is a truly incredible being of power. The feats he achieved in a very small pocket of time really do put him up there with some of the strongest deities in both canons. Now, with this said, what was the fallout outside of this game? Why is this game so horribly shunned by not only its community, but also its dev team? Well, this game was developed at a very problematic time in Midway's life. You see, the company was in a very bad spot. They were financially unstable and on borrowed time, and it eventually got to the point where they had to file for bankruptcy, and this unfortunately meant that the dev team and this game suffered from it. Originally, what some of you might not know is that this game originally had a DLC plan post-release, as they wanted to include the likes of Quan Chi, Harley Quinn, Doomsday, and even Kung Lao, but every single one of these ideas were cast into the abyss because the funding simply wasn't there. The company was bankrupt and they were finished. That is, until Warner Brothers stepped in and of course picked up the Mortal Kombat license, breathing new life into it. I won't go into detail because we all know how that story goes, but this largely covers everything about who the hell is Dark Kahn. I apologize if this wasn't as character focused as the others, but I needed to talk about the troubled creation of MKvDC to give you all an understanding about why not only Dark Kahn was forgotten to time, but why MKvDC was shunned. There's a reason why this game is looked down upon. The premise of this game sounds great on the surface, but the execution execution was unfortunately very poor, and due to finances and politics, it was ultimately the downfall of this game's creation. But that's not to say it was a bad thing. The legacy that this game left behind is what ultimately helped usher in NetherRealm Studios as a key face in fighting games moving forward. Since then, they have successfully revitalized the MK series, going back to its 2D roots, and creating the critically acclaimed DC Elseworld fighting game, Injustice. As bad as the bad may have been from this installment, it helped carve a better future for the team and what came next. But for now, this has been it for Who the Hell is Dark Kahn. I hope you have enjoyed this video and learnt more by doing so. This was really fun to put together. I knew I couldn't really talk about Dark Kahn without actually going into detail about MKvDC. I know a lot of people usually just talk about how much they hate MKvDC without giving it a reason. So I knew that in today's video, I wanted to talk about the real problems that surrounded this game's creation and why it was so tainted in production as well as release. It's kind of a mess as a whole, and I hope this gives you a new perspective on what happened to Dark Kahn and MKvDC. But for now, this has been it for me. So before this video wraps up guys, if possible, let's try getting it to about 500 likes, and please do not forget to tick that bell and subscribe, as it will keep you up to date with all of my content. But for now, as always guys, please comment, like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. Please take care, and I will see you all next time.